Hello everyone, my name is Benjamin Jacinto. Other students at Monroe Catholic High School in Hayward, California and I are developing a podcast, Eyes of Monroe, centered on the student's perspective of life. We're excited to be starting this up for the school and all you listeners. And we're hoping that you can listen along to all of our episodes. Now I'll turn it over to my co-host.
Thanks, Ben. My name's Kellie Marcus, and I hope we'll be able to serve our school and all of you with this podcast. Our episodes will air every Wednesday at 6 p.m., except for Monroe's finals, the week of May 20th, and the school's Easter break on April 24th.
Our mission is not just to have conversations with students about social issues and bring up their perspectives on life, but rather keep awareness of these issues and help initiate plans to become more socially active. We want to serve as an amplifier for today's young adults. With this podcast, we hope we can draw greater emphasis on teenagers, their impact on life for everyone, and the fact that we have the power to make a change.
And now we'd like to introduce you to the people who make it happen. Ben and I will interview our crew heads, and then we'll bring two of them up to interview us.
Okay, Kristin, so tell us a little bit about yourself, sports, outside life.
Okay, so as for my school life, I take part in Link Crew, and as for sports, I do track and field, and I did water polo at the beginning of junior year, so that was a really fun experience. And then at home, I'm just taking care of my family.
What do you see as the most important or prominent social issue in our world today?
I think the most important or prominent social issue that is happening with us is that you don't see a lot of kids or just people talk one-on-one to another. So I think that's something that we struggle with as this generation comes more adapted and so used to this technology. I mean, we literally were born into this generation where our lives depend on these technologies and devices and stuff like that. So I think it's really important that we learn to put down the phone or close the laptops and just try to embrace one another.
So do you agree that this media that we use in our generation, do you think that it's too controlling in our world?
I mean, to control, the word control doesn't necessarily have to associate with something bad and something that's very strict. Because I think even with the technology that we have today, we can create so many beautiful things. Although I do believe that it does control some aspects of our lives, that so much so that we don't really take the time and acknowledge who we are as a person and who we are to our family. And I think family time is really important just because we spend majority of our day at school. And when we go home, it's mostly just to eat and sleep. And then the next day we're right at school back again. So I really do believe that the connection you have with your family is really important.
Well, to conclude this interview, what is one piece of advice you would like to give to teens today?
One piece of advice I would love to give to teens today. I feel like it could be a plethora of things. But one thing that I taught myself was to stop trying to survive each day and to start living it. And what that means is because I used to be so caught up in my own personal struggles and in my own sorrow that I just try to live through each day as if, just try to get it done. But through the help of my parents and some self-meditation, I was able to realize that each day is so important because each interaction you have with one another can really change your guys' lives. I mean, I follow this quote. I forgot who said it, but the quote was, at least do one thing that scares you every day. And I find myself doing, things I wouldn't have done before, like talking to this person I don't usually talk to, or trying to have a better relationship with my teachers, or just trying to be out there as much as possible. And hopefully encouraging that to other students as well. Thank you.
Alrighty, so next up we have Fiona Cassidy, a sophomore at Monroe Catholic, and she is one of our scriptors. How are you doing today, Fiona?
I'm well, thank you.
Okay, glad to hear. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, for starters, I really love art, music, dance, literature. Like, those are just my passions.
Alrighty, so you're like right side. I'm pretty sure it's that correct side of the brain that's like the creativity side.
Yeah, I'm definitely that.
Alrighty. Do you have a religious faith that you hold on to its values? And if so, how does it influence your practices of life?
Well, I was baptized Protestant, but I am not practicing one. I am very not religious.
Alrighty, well, I'm a Catholic, but I don't go to Mass every Sunday, and I kind of get on myself for that sometimes, but, to each their own. So your ethnicity, like, where are your origins, and how do they influence your actions as a young adult?
Okay, well, I'm Caucasian. As far as I'm aware, my ancestors came from Western Europe. And I'm not really sure how my skin... I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, that last part of the question?
Well, like, does your ethnicity, like, influence any of your actions? So, like, it can even be something like, well, I'm partially Cherokee, and so, my grandmother, when I was younger, she took me to a group meeting they had out over in, I want to say Georgia? But, anyhow, it's just like, what, if anything, have you done that has been like, hey, I'm doing this because I'm this?
No, not really. Honestly, I think I'm kind of blinded in some sense because of my skin tone. Because I know that I have different opportunities because I am white than someone who would be black.
Okay. So I take it you have a very critical emphasis in your life, maybe on race or modern day, maybe something like social justice values, like such as equality in pay or racial equality.
Yes, equality regardless whether or not it's race, ethnicity, gender is really important to me.
Okay, well that's good to hear, because this is what we hope for all of our students and to all you listening out there, that we can be an active community who strives to make a change. Now, we know the Super Bowl is last Sunday. What are your thoughts on mass media, such as news or Twitter?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure how you connected the Super Bowl and like question what your thoughts are on mass media, but in regards to the Super Bowl, I could not really care less. Like I said, I am not a sports person, and I feel like the media and the press, they can be a really valuable asset, and they can affect positive and good change. But there have been definite times, like with Hitler and anti-Semitic propaganda, where it was used for negative consequences.
Okay. Well, when we look at the Super Bowl, we see commercials where people are paying billions of dollars and a few million just to get a 30-second window. Do you think we as in America are driven by advertisements and consumerism?
I think there is some definite truth that we are driven by entertainment and consumerism, but you also need to think about, like, do I really need this thing, or do I only want this because the commercial is telling me I want this?
That's a good viewpoint to hold. And so, how do you place yourself on the political spectrum?
I'm a liberal.
Okay. Well, in terms of the liberal spectrum, do you consider yourself to be like extreme, or do you consider yourself to be closer to the middle, with the middle being like a mix of maybe you're liberal in your values of equality, but maybe you're financially conservative? It's sort of like, is there any like bits of conservative parts in you, and if so, what are they?
Well, in terms of me having some conservative value, I would say that increasing taxes is not the only solution, that we could find other ways, but that's basically it.
Okay. And lastly, what's one piece of advice that you can give to your fellow teens out there today?
Just be confident.
I know it might sound cheesy, but you just need to learn to love yourself, even if you have to say that to yourself every morning in the mirror, like for five times straight. Because loving yourself is really important. I don't really have a direction with this, but I hope everyone knows that and can eventually learn it.
Alrighty, and I hope we can spread that love not only as a group making this podcast, but as a group of our school in a whole, and each of us as an individual with the power to make a change. So, thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Ben.
So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what are your activities that you do inside, outside of school? Who plays values in your life, and more?
Yeah, I'm just a normal teenager. I used to play sports in high school. I did cross country and badminton for a while. Currently, I hold a job as a Python programming instructor, where I teach people how to program in the programming language of Python. Yeah, and I just love helping my parents out whenever possible.
Alrighty. Do you think that there's a prominent social issue in today's teenager society? And if so, what do you think it is?
I wouldn't say that this necessarily pinpoints to teenagers only. It probably does pinpoint to every other age group that I can think of, but one major thing that I can think of, and this isn't to sound biased because of the assembly we had today, but I'd probably say stereotyping. There's always that common image that you always associate a certain type of person with, like, for example, you would always expect an Asian person to be good at math or whatnot. So, that's probably something that I consider to be a prominent social issue.
Alrighty. And what role does your ethnicity or what do you associate as, or your identity? How does that impact the choices you make in today's life?
I associate myself as predominantly Chinese. I wouldn't say that it really influences my actions, because I'd say that my actions in everyday life are that of any typical American. But sometimes around the house, normally, my parents want me to get accustomed to Chinese tradition, especially with Chinese New Year coming up. We have traditions of keeping the house tidy for the new year and whatnot. So that's something that I would say influences my actions.
Okay. Well, how about this? There are certain things like Covington Catholic, that event that went down with the Right for Life March, and a few other events here and there throughout the country that have to do with students possibly being raised in the wrong way, per se, even though wrong is, of course, a perspective. Do you think that there's a certain cause that we can find within how parents are raising their children based off of their experiences and worldview?
Well, obviously everyone's different. Everyone's raised differently. Different parents are going to have different ideas of how to raise their children. I'd really say that the parent has to figure out how their child runs, because even they sometimes don't know themselves. So once they get to know their child well enough, not just in their child stages, but their teenage stages, because everyone goes through that point in life where they experience a notable change in personality. Parents are going to have to be able to experience their child through multiple stages of life, and then be able to adapt their lifestyle around it so that they can better be able to connect with their children. So I'd say that's it.
Alrighty. Well, that's a very well put opinion. It's respectable as well. And besides race, is there anything such as your political views or maybe your religion that shape your actions?
I wouldn't say so necessarily. I do practice religion. I was raised Baptist. As far as political spectrum goes, I'd probably consider myself an independent. I wouldn't say that any political party would necessarily convert me with their views or whatnot, but personally think that I like to make choices in my life based on what I think is right. Sometimes those choices may not turn out to be the correct choice, but people learn from their mistakes and become better people that way.
Alrighty. How do you think, if at all, the media sort of has a grip on our actions and influences us in our daily lives, considering with the Covington Catholic incident, we see all our media industries, well, most of them, as well as many, many celebrities, jump to conclusions immediately off a 2-minute, 46-second video. Not to say it's the wrong conclusion or the right conclusion, but regardless, do you think the media has evolved into something that propels us to jump to conclusions rather than waiting and becoming critical thinkers?
I definitely would think that the media is a shaper into how people think, especially in this day and age where everything is pretty much controlled by technology, and now we have access to all these different platforms where we can develop multiple media forms where we can basically view or express our opinions. I mean, it used to be that we would only have the newspaper to be able to read on what's happening around the world, basically. But now you can literally wake up in the morning and then look on your phone, and then boom, there's the news right there. It's not a surprise that the news about the Super Bowl that just happened spread so quickly. I definitely think that the media does play a big factor into how today's world is being controlled, per se, because a lot of news travels faster when there's multiple mediums that are available to the public in order to be able to spread it around and have it well known.
And lastly, considering the challenges yet opportunities that we face as young adults, what's one piece of advice you have for your fellow young adults out there in the world?
I don't want to sound too cliche here when I say this, but I think the best piece of advice I can give is probably just be yourself. Don't let yourself be converted by what other people think is trendy or whatever people think is right. People always have their own opinions of different things. Not everyone is programmed to be the same way. No one's going to have the exact same opinion as you. I feel like when people get too infatuated with, what's trending and what's hot around the internet, not just the internet, but like whether they read it in magazines or whatnot, don't convert your entire personality based on that one trend that you find, because then you're going to pretty much lose your identity at that point. The only true identity that you hold is the one that you were born with, and only you have the power to control that. So, yeah.
Alrighty. Thanks, Kevin. So, Keavi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a student athlete. I'm on principal's honors. I'm generally a nice guy.
Okay.
Hopefully.
So what do you see as the most prominent social issue for teens in the world today?
I would have to say their views on each other and themselves.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know how some students view other students differently?
Okay.
And how they view themselves in a different light and can be harsh on themselves or very light? It depends on the mental state of that student and other people like that.
Okay. Do you think that, any of the mental states or actions that we take as students has to do with, our race or our religious faith?
I guess, but when comparing to those things, you always gotta know, you always have to go with, a better sense of stuff and not be so judgmental towards others.
Alright, well, adding off on these, now hitting, a harder question per se for these times, where would you place yourself on the political spectrum?
I would have to say the middle. I'm an independent. I don't really side with either side, but I do agree with some of their views on both.
Okay, not a bad place to be, So, on Sunday we had the Super Bowl and the Patriots won. But besides that, we see commercials constantly from it, and even then the memes are already out. But what's your thought on that? Did you watch Super Bowl? Why or why not?
Yeah, I watched Super Bowl, of course, but who wouldn't? It's just, the only reason I watched it, I didn't care about the teams. It was kind of both weird in a way. Patriots keep winning, so it doesn't really affect me anyway. But I love watching the Super Bowl for the commercials. Nothing else.
Okay, cool. And so, do you think that, TV and shows is one of the many channels through which we receive, and do you think the media controls our actions, or at least plays key influences?
I think it places our views in different lights. It makes us think in different ways, to be a little bit more judgmental towards people.
Alrighty, and then to finish it off, what's your one piece of advice, if you had to give one, to your fellow teens out in the world?
Study hard and just have faith in everyone else, that they'll do the right thing, as long as you do the right thing.
Alrighty, thank you.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Sports, outside life, as much detail as possible.
Well, at Monroe Catholic, I'm a part of Link Crew, which is a leadership team that is exclusive to juniors and seniors. I am on the varsity water polo team here at Monroe, and I just completed my second season, so I'm hoping to continue my senior year. And outside life, I don't really do a lot. I go to church occasionally, and yeah.
Okay, so besides you going to church, what other religious practices do you have in your day-to-day life, and how does that influence your choices today?
Personally, I practice Catholicism, but I haven't been maintaining it as much as I used to. I do wish that I could go to Mass more often, because I feel that I've been lacking a lot of faith in my life. And yeah.
Why do you think that is, that we lack faith in today's society as teenagers?
I feel like social media affects it a lot because it can change perception on religion. It can change like our ideas about it.
So do you think as a nation we are too controlled by our media?
Yes, because we mostly interact with media because like news coverages like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, it pretty much contains all of our news. And yeah.
So what is one piece of advice you would give to your fellow teens?
I say to don't give up, because I feel like teenagers these days give up, especially me. I do give up sometimes, but I feel like if you keep your head up and have confidence in yourself, then you can accomplish many things.
So, Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, on Monroe's campus, I find myself in the student leader or student activist role. I'm part of our Dream Coalition, which is a group centered on empowering diversity through various exhibits, attractions, and activities. Outside of school, however, I do a 180 flip, if you will. On Friday nights, I live in Oakland, and on the shores of Lake Merritt, there's a group of us who spin circus props, if you will, with wicks on the end that we dunk in oil and then light them on fire. So we spin fire. It's an entertaining activity for me, and I find it to be one of the key things I identify myself with when they're like, "Yo, Ben, what's something fun that you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I spin fire down at Lake Merritt every Friday night around 9 p.m.
Okay. What do you view as like one of the most prominent or biggest issues in the world today?
Well, when it comes to issues in the world, there are plenty, and to various degrees, that affect everyone in one way or another. But for me personally, I'd probably say the issue when it comes to parenting. And I know that our modern day and age parents are trying to care for us, and some of them are doing it right. And I'll probably rant about this in an episode later, but you cannot give your kid an iPad as a babysitter.
Really? Would you like to extend more about this topic?
Well, I'd love to, but for time reasons, all I will say is that when it comes to child-parent interactions, the first few months after birth, a key bond is developed that is centered on trust between the newborn child and the primary caregiver, predominantly the mother. And should that not be formed, the child suffers unattachment. And because of this, if it keeps advancing and nothing stops it, we can end up with people from politicians to the next Ted Bundy or Charles Manson. But the long story short of it is that even then, it won't be that extreme. Most likely it won't. However, we have to make sure that we're raising our children with the intentions to have them be socially uplifting. Because if we look at us, even nowadays, even us in our age, we're on our phones, and many times, myself included, we use it to escape out of something, be it a conversation with someone. Maybe we're passing someone we don't like, so we put the phone up our ear and pretend we're calling to someone. I know no one admits it, but it's something that we do to one extent or another, and that we really need to fix that.
That's a very important topic. I think we'll get into that later on in the year, right?
Yes, we will. That'll be one of our episodes emphasizing social qualities in the modern age.
Ben, do you practice any religious faith? And if so, what influences your choice because of it?
I'll admit right now up front that I am not as devoted, for lack of a better term, of a Catholic as I should be. I'm not going to say I go to Mass every Sunday and I donate a bunch of money when the baskets come around, but I will say that I believe in action-based Catholicism, which I don't know if it's an official thing or not. It's just my personal idea about it. But why go into church and sit down, kneel in pews, if we aren't going to be able to go out into the world and make a change? Now, I know that we do have to attend church, as it's one of our crucial ways we continue to connect with God, and we renew our faith, and it cleanses us of our sins every time we take Eucharist and drink the blood. However, I also ask myself, there are homeless situations, there are war zones, there are things going on all the time, and considering the number of Catholics in the world, I believe we can make some sort of a change or another to help with that. And I think it just comes down to doing the small deeds. So, in short, I decided to get myself baptized, receive my first communion, and be confirmed during my 8th grade Easter at Our Lady of Grace in Castro Valley. But even though I haven't been as devoted as I would like to be when it comes to the basic laywoman acts of being Catholic, I will say that it is taken upon myself, by me, that I need to be able to make a change out there.
Ben, where do you place yourself on the political spectrum?
I definitely place myself a little bit more on the liberal side. I grew up in the Bay. I've lived in Castro Valley, Hayward, and Oakland. And I gotta say, the Bay is one of the most diverse places. San Francisco, and Oakland even, it's arguably the most diverse place in the world. And I gotta say, that's definitely influenced my worldview. So I'll admit, I'm pretty liberal. I support LGBTQ rights, equality for all races, equality between the genders when it comes to pay. But I also recognize that many of us who live in Oakland or San Francisco need to be financially conservative. Not only because it supports our beliefs and values, but that over time we have to adapt those beliefs and values to try to get the most. I mean, considering college, one of our history teachers here, he told me a story how he would either be eating top ramen, the giant Skippy jars of peanut butter you get from Costco, or on Wednesdays, I believe, when McDonald's had the $1 burger day, he'd go down and he'd buy about 20 hamburgers for $1 each and freeze them. And then, in emergency, he'd take one, heat it up, and eat it on his way to his class. And so, I do believe myself to be more liberal, but at the same time, I hope I can understand the conservative side and also seek a compromise, per se, because that's definitely something we lack in this day and age.
Okay, what's one piece of advice that you want your fellow students to remember?
The one piece of advice I have for the teens out there, young, old, 13 to 24, even if you're a teenager at heart, which probably isn't likely, but, it could be you. My one piece of advice is that no matter what you do, you need to be critical in almost everything you do. And now I know that may sound a bit complicated or paradoxical, but in this day and age, we are continually given new challenges or tasks that say, hey, where do you stand on this? It's a divisive era, and the only way to get out of this divisive era is that when we run the country one day, and we will, because sooner or later we're all going to be up there in our 30s or 40s running for the next seat on Congress or working for CNN, so on and so forth. But when that day does come, we will have to be able to put aside our differences to not make mistakes, that those in generations past have made. And only when we become critical listeners, thinkers, and speakers will we be able to achieve development or bill or other item that allows us to benefit everyone, and we truly become a democracy of America.
Thank you, Ben.
After these interviews, we'll do our best to stay true to ourselves and you, the listeners, as we pursue the modern age in a diverse country from a teenager's perspective.
Thank you all for joining us for our first episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune back in next Wednesday for our discussion on what love means today in students' eyes.